The
It was
density.
yeah.
Eh,
Yep,
well,
between.
purebred. And now
Yeah.
we're live. Hey, good morning,
Oh,
everybody. Morning, Justin.
Morning.
Morning, Marianne.
morning.
Thanks for jumping on with us this morning. And I was just say thank you for everyone who's been watching and viewing,
Yes,
subscribing,
thank you.
liking. I really appreciate it. I hope that people are getting use out of this. We love doing it. We're having a lot of fun, and I think we're getting a lot of information out, and things come out of this that we didn't expect. So it was
Yeah.
really great. So if you'd like to take a look, we have a playlist on YouTube. Matt can throw up the link there when he has a chance.
Mhm.
And so what we're going to talk about today is what's the best way to select a workstation or machine based on your technology needs. This kind of came out of our original conversation of like a laptop for any bargain, but it kind of, as we expanded the scope, it got a lot more we think we asked more questions than we answered, and even ourselves, and then this from outside.
Yeah.
And then what we ended up doing was then we added on top of that with the whole conversation on supply chain. So it definitely impacts or some decisions and how you
Mhm.
look at things. So with that in mind, what we're going to do is let's dive in and start with talking about how do you determine what's the best machine that you need. So I'm going to let you guys kick it off. I know you guys. I know Justin does a lot of this. Marion does a lot of this. Answers a lot of these questions. So
Yeah.
let's just have at it. What's the best? How do I determine what machine I should use?
I think the first thing you have to figure out is what you're going to use it for, because
Mhm.
that's really going to determine, do you need a desktop, a laptop, a tablet, a Chromebook, a phone? What is the best
Right.
fit? Because they're all geared towards good use cases and for certain things, and it's really easy to spend way too much money on something that is going to be overkill for what you're doing. So the
Right.
first thing is to figure out what kind of things you're going to be doing with it.
Right. And what are give us some example of some of the things you should kind of think about with this? Like, what are the things that you do with
Yeah.
it? That's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What exactly do
What
you
do you
do here?
do?
What do you do here? Right. Exactly.
So, I mean, the first and foremost is, are you going to be using this for work, for fun, for both? If it's for work, then what kind of work are you doing? Are you running office programs? Are you doing things online through the browser? Are you editing photos, editing videos? These are all things that are going
Right.
to drive what you're going to use. If you're using, let's say, like office programs, but have a bunch of them open, and you have a bunch of Chrome tabs or Firefox tabs open at the same time, that also drives what you're doing,
Right.
what you need for it. So
Mhm.
that's I'd say the first thing to start looking at is that piece of it.
Right. It, it,
Yeah. So think about, and part of what you're doing, we split it into a couple of different sections.
Mhm,
One is, do you need high performance? Do you
mhm,
need to be editing videos? Are you using Photoshop? Because we talked about not wanting to buy something too big for your needs and spending that extra money, but also don't buy something and then figure out that you can't do everything that you need to do.
right.
yeah.
So one of the things that we talk about is high performance. Do you need it for video editing, or even if we're doing talking for fun? Do you need it for gaming? Do you need
Mhm,
Right.
good, you know, FPS and
FPS.
all
yeah.
that stuff? That stuff's another topic. But
Yeah.
do think about, is it going to be doing both? So yeah, so that you're generally going to have to look at things with higher specifications. Usually a desktop, you
Mhm.
can get better performance at a lesser price. There are gaming laptops, but um or
Right.
for that stuff, but it
Right.
Yeah.
depends on what you do.
One
Justin,
of
you
the
were going to say.
things, yeah, no, one of the things I prefer desktops over laptops, and for the same token, PC over Mac, really because
Go.
of upgradability. In that, if
Right.
you put together your own desktop, you've got room to swap everything out of it except for the motherboard and processor. Those two pieces are kind
Right.
of the core of it. Everything else connects to it, and you
Mhm.
can upgrade the RAM, upgrade the hard drive, upgrade the graphics card.
Right.
Whereas, but of course, you lose out on the portability. So that's another thing that
I
you
s-
want to think
yeah.
about
But
is,
that's also a good point. If you guys are
mm,
bored at home during quarantine, think about building your own computer.
yeah.
I
It's a
did it with a lot of help from friends and coworkers.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for that disclaimer about
Yeah.
Easily take a fingertip off on a CPU fan.
Yeah.
a little.
A little one,
Yeah.
a fingertip. This is the nail.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think portability. That's a great kind of go back. The portability is a great kind of maybe the first
Oh yeah.
determinator. Like, hey, do they move around with this thing, or do I need the power and flexibility and upgradability of a desktop? And it's like almost like you can build a checklist of like all the different pieces. They kind of almost give you like a end result. I think that's
Yeah,
maybe
definitely.
something that we could work on.
Yeah.
So beyond the portability, what other things are out there? So we have some desktops, we have laptops. We talked
Yeah.
about a couple of things. Like what are use cases? What's that?
Yeah, so I think the next thing to consider too before the use case is also whether or not even a laptop is what you need. You can also
Right. True.
do a tablet, and I know the especially the iPad Pro and there's new Samsung tablets are very powerful and can do
Right.
a lot of stuff. And this is where it depends on what you're primarily going to be doing with it. If you're getting something so that you can browse the web, play some simple games,
Right.
and watch Netflix and Hulu and streaming, a tablet may be perfect because you're going to get
True.
high battery life, it's going to be portable, and you can do those things. If you're going to spend a lot of time typing or creating content, you may want to go for a laptop or a desktop.
Right. Yeah,
Fair
and
enough.
even some tablets you can get like the accessory
Mhm.
keyboard, but they're just not as comfortable. So if you
It's true.
are occupying your time writing your new novel, or if writing is a huge part of your work, you don't
Right.
really want to use those. Those are really more for like in a pinch. It's better than tapping on the screen, but it's not
Right.
for like high volume.
Mhm.
It's not meant to
Yeah.
be that comfortable. They're not meant to be that durable. So
True. And even that, we always going back to some earlier Q&As we did, the external keyboard even on a laptop extends the life of the laptop, keeps it easier, and it's
Definitely.
better in your hands.
yeah, that's
ergonomically,
true.
too. So we always say get a external keyboard. It's not a huge expense, and it makes a huge difference in terms of ergonomics, that sort of thing.
Yes,
But
and
yeah,
you
I
can do that on a laptop, but
Right.
how many tablets have got all the bells and whistles that you can start playing
True.
with.
Yeah. You start expanding the cost, and this the tablet costs as much as the laptop or even a desktop at that point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the things that was thrown out there was a Chromebook,
Mhm.
which is out there,
Oh, yeah.
which is basically running the Chrome OS, which is a Google product, and they think if you like work in the Google verse, it's a great product because it's you're doing good Gmail and docs, that sort of thing. So really powerful, low cost, and pretty cool for what it is.
Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
good step between a tablet and a laptop, and
Right.
that you want to be able to type up and do those things, but you're also not really installing a lot of applications because you really can't install
Yeah.
applications on it. It's mostly for web access, and it sort of sits right in between those two as
Very
a
cool.
good
Yeah.
good piece of equipment.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
and I've had a couple people who are like, Chromebook is cheaper. What is the difference? The biggest difference is you're not really running a lot of applications. You're not having stuff downloaded onto your computer. If you're using it because you like to use, it's like web browsing and stuff like that, you can still write a lot because it's got a built-in keyboard
Mhm.
that's really nice.
Yep.
But like I use it for writing, for fun writing, and I just do it straight in Google Drive. So I'm just
Mhm.
writing directly into Google Drive. I don't even have that stuff saved to my computer.
Right.
So it is all about the internet, but they do have offline mode. I know that we got like a question that was, are Chromebooks only good for the working on the internet? You can do offline mode and sync that stuff down.
Right.
Yeah,
Pretty
you
cool,
have to
actually.
configure it ahead of time so that
Right.
you're ready to go, and then if you
Yeah.
take it offline or lose internet, you can still do those things on it.
Mhm.
Uh,
Whereas
so
a
so configure it.
laptop, you can have program files on it. You can have files on it. You're not going to be downloading
Mhm.
pictures to your Chromebook. That's not
Right.
workable.
I think a good just a thing if you're thinking about installing anything, Chromebook probably is out at that point
Correct.
because
Yeah.
there are some basic apps that you can run, kind of like phone apps that'll run on it. But for the most part, if you're thinking like, oh, I'll download Word or I'll download this program that I like, you're going to want
Mhm.
a Windows or a Mac machine, and that's going to be a laptop or a desktop.
That makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. That's great. So, all right, now we kind of defined the different units out there, what we use
Mhm.
it for. Let's talk about some basics, some of the pieces of like what is the spec? What are they? And I mean, I've been doing this a long time. All three of us have been doing this a long time. How would you know? I mean, if you didn't know what you go to a store or you look online, you wouldn't know what you're looking at. So I think
Yeah.
So what are some specs that we should know about?
Yeah.
Our audience should know about before they buy a machine. So
Yeah, so the specs are going to be whenever you're looking at a machine, it is, everything that it lists, which can be super confusing if you don't know what
Mhm.
they are. So that's what we'll go into. It'll be all of the different components and why is this one more expensive than this one. You'll be able to see that in the specifications.
Yeah, I think the first thing to look at is going to be what kind of processor it's using. That's going to
Mhm.
be the first sort of deciding factor that's going to determine a lot of the rest of the stuff, because a lot of
Mhm.
times it's built around that. And the processor is a what does the calculating and the thinking and the running and of moving data through the machine. So
Mhm.
that's going to be the based on what you were thinking of before. If you're going to be doing something like video or photo editing, and photo editing different than just like taking photos and posting them online, like running Photoshop or things like that. Or if you're going to
Lightroom.
be doing
Illustrator.
if you're going to be doing any like intense gaming, and different than just like casual games, things that are
Mhm.
uh, like phone type games or simple games, things like that are like the AAA plus games that are 60, 70, $100 to buy.
I'm still all
Those
about
games.
Overwatch, so you need that. So let's
It's
get
true.
on that.
Overwatch requires, yeah, it's true.
So for
Yeah.
those types of things, you're going to want a better processor. So now, how do you figure out what a better processor is? There's really, I would say, three things that you look at. The first is the speed, and that's measured usually in gigahertz.
Mhm.
And for the most part, the difference between 2.1, 2.2, 2.8 is not that much. But you want to compare between two of them. If one of them is 1 point something and one of them is 3 point something, well, obviously the 3 is going to be faster. The 2 is going to be somewhere in the middle. And
Mhm.
the faster it is, the quicker it's going to run things through.
Right.
The second thing you want to look at is what's called the number of cores. And this can get a little confusing and technical, but the
Mhm.
short version is the number of cores is the number of things that the computer can think about at the same time. So if you're running two programs at the same time, they don't conflict with each other. They can both actually run at the same time. So 2 cores, you can run two things. 4 cores, you can run four things. And the machine does other tricks and stuff to make
Right.
Your
it.
computer's brain multitasking.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the third thing, and this gets a little more complicated, is called threads, which is how many things can each core do at once. And it's either one or two. It's either matches the
Mhm.
number of cores or it's double. So you could have a 4 core machine that does 8 threads. And the idea there is that you can run more things at the same time, and the computer's good at doing switching between them, at multitasking, at
Right.
using the right hand and its left hand for doing something different at the same time.
Okay.
So that's a lot. And
Yeah.
It is.
luckily, the big two manufacturers really condense them down into different tiers. So there's Intel and AMD are the two big manufacturers. And when we look at Intel, they break their processors down into i3, i5, i7, and i9, going from most cost effective and least powerful to most expensive and most powerful. So
Mhm.
Right.
and AMD does the same thing with Ryzen. They do 3, 5, 7, 9. So it's kind of the same spread.
Yeah.
And you can, based on those, kind of figure out, okay, an i5 is generally better than an i3, and i7 is generally better than an i5, and figure out from there where
Yeah.
you're going to line, where you're going to fall in.
And look
I,
at if you are getting something where you have if you're doing a program, if you're doing Photoshop, you can look at what the recommended specs are, not the
Mm-hmm.
minimum specs, because that's like you can technically use this. Do the
right.
recommended specifications and see what that says, because that's really important for what
Hmm.
you're using it for.
Absolutely, yeah. Also, it's because of look and feel and how it behaves. That the application is responsive. Huge change on that.
Mhm.
I think.
Yeah.
I think. The other, I mean, some of the other things that are really important to keep in mind is that tablet CPUs are not the same as the
Yeah.
CPUs. The tablet CPUs are more aligned with machines from mobile devices such as phones, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
So
if
yeah,
you're
an
looking,
iPad is closer to an iPhone than it is to an iMac.
mhm. Yeah, if you're looking at a tablet, CPUs are not those. Yeah, those are definitely CPUs for laptops and desktops.
Right.
The tablet CPUs will be sometimes the manufacturer of the tablet makes their own. Sometimes they get them from other providers. They're it's they're not as easy to compare between, uh,
Right.
and there are other factors in tablets that are more of a driving factor in the purchase for that.
Mhm.
Right.
Mostly storage and RAM, because
And
the
yeah,
CPUs on them are built for battery saving, not for
Right.
performance.
yeah.
Right.
Well, let's
And
talk RAM.
Yeah.
RAM is an important thing that changes the behavior of the machine. What is it? What is RAM exactly? What does it mean?
Mm,
So RAM stands for random access memory. The way I like to think of it is it's your short-term memory. It's how many things you can remember at once in your head. So I've got a book of recipes, and that's my hard drive where that has all of it. And I go search through the book, and that takes some time. And I look at the ingredients I need. Now I can keep that in my head while I go to the fridge to grab them. That in my head is the memory, is RAM, is how much
Right.
stuff you can access really quickly. And the there's a lot of different factors into it, but if for the most part, 90% of the time, the more the better. So
Right.
if
mhm.
it's uh, 8, 16, 32, 64 gigs or some standards for it, the bigger that number is, the better it's going to perform, because the more stuff it can remember at
Mhm.
one time without having
Right.
to go back to the
Right.
the recipe book.
And the
Yeah,
only downside to more RAM is that the more RAM you have, the more power it uses.
Yes.
Correct.
yeah,
So that generally speaking, the laptop is a balance between the amount of RAM you have
Mhm.
versus how much battery life you want to have.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So
desktops, another reason why they're good for power stuff is that there's no battery; it's always plugged in. So you could
yeah.
load it up with RAM, and it's just going to draw more electricity, not uh, drain a battery.
Also, I mean, laptops and desktops tend to you can often upgrade the RAM. So if that's something that you don't have the money for now, you could add it later,
Mhm.
but much easier on a desktop. Laptops maybe like it's a lot more limitations, which is definitely for another time. But
right.
unlike we were talking about processing units, RAM you can upgrade later.
Mhm.
So
Generally speaking, yes.
Generally, yeah, there are
generally
some,
speaking, there are
especially,
some.
well, and especially things like the Apple products. There's no upgrading. Whatever you
Yeah,
buy
that's
when you
true.
get it, that's what you get.
S-
Same thing for like Surface Books,
Surface, right, right.
or any of the like the really thin ultra portables. You
Yeah.
may be able to upgrade, but you
Mostly
also,
not.
yeah, and it may not. And the
Yeah,
upgrade process might be so complicated, like taking the entire thing apart.
It
So
could void the warranty to take the whole thing
yeah,
apart,
exactly,
whereas
exactly.
that's
a
one to check before you
desktop is
buy
like,
it. Yeah,
"Mm,
All right,
yeah.
and the last part about this basic thing is the storage.
Mhm.
oh
So
yeah,
so I think it's really important that we define storage, which is, as Justin said, that's where you keep the recipes.
Mhm.
It's the big book of recipes. And there's a couple of different kinds of storage, right? Which one is the one we want to use
Yeah.
well, I
ideally?
think we should talk first about words that you'll recognize with
Oh yeah,
storage. You'll hear
exactly.
things say like disk space
Oh,
or
perfect. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
it's your hard drive and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of terms that go to that. So we're going to talk to you about the different types of hard drives. But if you
Mhm.
see something that says like disk space or storage space or hard drive space, stuff like that,
Mhm.
space.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
Yeah. There's generally two types. There's SATA, or spinning disks, which are the older type of storage, and then there's SSD, which is the newer type. So the big differences between them: SATA and or spinning drives are generally bigger. So if you have a lot of stuff that you need to store, those are going to be cheaper to get, and they're generally cheaper, bigger and cheaper, but
mhm,
they're also much slower. So if you are buying a new machine, you want to look for something that has an SSD drive, and those are much faster. The basic way that the two of them work: a spinning drive has actual physical spinning pieces inside that it reads, and it's mechanical part, so there's potentially failure on it,
Right.
but it's
mhm,
cheaper and denser. Whereas SSDs use the same kind of technology as like USB thumb drives,
yeah,
or those little camera cards, but much faster and denser, less likely to fail because there's no moving parts in them. They have their own uh, maintenance that you have to do on them, but for the
mhm,
most part, they're generally a little bit more expensive, but much faster.
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, you're going to want to go with an SSD drive, because it's going to
mhm.
make the machine way faster
Right.
per dollar. And the only time I
Yeah.
would say to go with a SATA or spinning drive is if you need lots and lots of storage. If you're like storing tons and tons of movies or pictures or things like that,
Mhm.
and even then, if you can, do one of each so that you could
Yeah,
have one to run
Correct.
everything and one to store
that's
everything.
another advantage of having a desktop is you
Mhm.
can mix them. You could do one of each. So the SSD should always be the original drive because
Mhm.
that's where the speed comes from. I'll tell you when I changed from a desktop with a spinning disk, which sometimes you'll see it in as HDD when you're looking at the specifications when you're shopping,
Mhm.
uh, and then went to an SSD.
SSD.
When I turned it on, it wasn't like and this was a little while ago, but like I used to turn on my computer and then be like, okay, let me go grab a drink, let me whatever. My SSD, it's like I turn it on and then it's like, oh, my computer's on. Okay.
Right. With the
I mean,
data.
Yeah.
and it definitely depends on the other factors in your computer, but still, it's just like that. The very first impression of SSD for me was like, okay, yeah, now it's
Yeah.
gonna save me a ton of time.
It really does. It
Yeah.
does.
And
And
it's everything, loading programs, running stuff,
Yep.
saving things, opening files.
right.
It just makes all of that much faster.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when you go back to using a traditional HDD, you're going to be like so irritated because it's so slow. Like I used one the other day, I was like, so it was
And
terrible.
and here's where some of the balance of all those things to when you're picking something, the balance of those three pieces together. If you have an SSD, you can get away with less RAM. So if you've got a machine that's 8 gigs of RAM and a SSD, and a machine that's 16 gigs of RAM and a spinning drive, a hard drive, uh, the one with less RAM might actually be faster because the SSD is that much faster.
Correct.
So
Hmm.
Yeah.
that's pieces to take into consideration as well too.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you know the spread of everything, if you have a super fast processor but not enough RAM and a slow drive, you're still going to have a slow machine. You need to have all three of those kind of around the same, either low, medium, or high tier. Otherwise, you're wasting the resources that are there. They're not getting used efficiently.
I think we
Yeah.
missed. I think we skipped over one thing while we're doing this definition. I know we're going a little long on this. I'm going to yell that soon, but the GPU, which is
Yes.
the graphical processing unit, that's basically like a coprocessor and RAM for driving video and
Hmm.
and the
Hmm.
screen, and it's really important video editing, gaming, or applications that are like very video intensive, like if you're doing 3D renders, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely. If you're doing, yeah, if you're doing intense gaming, if you're doing video editing, if you're doing intense photo editing, those kind of things, you're going to want a separate graphics card. And
Hmm.
uh, there are some good sites. I know we uh, uh, saw it pop up earlier. Passmark is a good site for CPU and GPU
Yep.
benchmarks, just to
Hmm.
view price per device. But for the most part, if you're not doing those things, if you're doing basic stuff, you can use the graphics card that's built into the processors. You don't need a
Right.
Yeah.
separate one.
Got it.
And
Got it.
most, even with laptops, most graphics card will be good for an additional monitor. But if you're
Mhm.
going to have a setup like some of the guys in our office, where you're like monitor, 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 do look into the graphics card as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we have our question from Mr. Kaup, as always. He always it was just a good one in there
Yeah.
about iPad Pro as a laptop replacement, which is actually really interesting. And if you don't, and the big question really comes down to is, are there remote desktop options available for iOS? Remote desktop is a Microsoft or Citrix technology. You can use either one, or you can run a machine on a server on a cloud,
Yep.
in various different formats. This is a whole topic, but the short answer is yes. But
Yeah.
Justin, I think you should go over that a little bit. It's a little bit,
No,
and then we'll
it's
get segment three.
definitely there's
Yeah.
a remote desktop. Microsoft makes a remote desktop client specifically for Apple desktop and tablet devices or laptops too. So yes, you can absolutely use it to remote control like a terminal server or another machine. You can also get apps like Go to PC or Log Me In or those things that'll run on
Right.
it. You definitely can use the iPad Pro as a laptop replacement if what you're looking at is the lower end of laptop usage. If you're, looking to run like a lot of office applications, or you're looking to play the latest games, you may not want to go that route just because it's not going to have the same performance and support. But if you're
Right.
looking at browsing and even the because you can get the pen that comes with it. So even some art and drawing and creating things on there, and some
Mhm.
video editing stuff you can do on there pretty well.
Right.
It definitely is a good tool, a good middle ground between tablet and laptop and computer.
Cool.
Mhm.
So, just to kind of finish this up, let's talk about a little bit of cost and lifespan of machines.
Mhm.
With the supply chain, we might be dusting off some of our old stuff going forward if we can't get new
Mhm.
things. So there's a great article I saw that was in Wall Street Journal the other day. That was pretty interesting. Check it out if you have a second. But
Mhm.
it's kind of talk about some cost and lifespan when you're buying these, when you're making this selection of
Mhm.
this machine, something. So
Yeah,
what,
definitely.
what are we looking at here?
So most bang for your buck is going to be a desktop. Is always going to be the cheapest per device. Some of the downsides with it, though, obviously it's not portable. Uh,
Yeah.
you have to have monitor and external keyboard and mouse and all that stuff to think of. But you can, most TVs now are going to have an HDMI input, and you can connect a desktop direct to a TV. So if you're buying something for like gaming and watching stuff on, you don't necessarily need a dedicated monitor. You can hook that straight up to your TV. Uh, the other piece of it is upgradability, that you can have an old desktop and add more RAM to it, add another hard drive to it, add
SSD.
an
Mhm.
SSD to it, and get new life out of it.
That's great.
Uh, the
Yeah.
For some laptops, the same is true. It's a little trickier because they're not as big and open, but you can, if you've got a laptop, an old laptop that has a spinning hard drive in it, you can swap that out for an SSD, and that thing will run like new. I mean, I have
Mhm.
a perfect example is I have a laptop that I use as a spare, and I have hooked up to a TV just to watch. I was watching Amazon Prime last night on it, and Hulu, and it's a really old machine, but I put an SSD drive in it, and it was like brand new. It just, for
Right.
that kind of stuff, works great.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Very purpose driven. So
Mhm.
and you could just get extend the life of these
Mhm.
equipment, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
So
and same thing for tablets, for phones. If you've got stuff you don't, even if you're replacing that, you don't necessarily need to get rid of them. There are things you can do with them. I've got a tablet set up in my kitchen that I have hooked up to speakers, and I play music on it and look up recipes when I'm in there. And
that's cool.
it's all I use it for. So I have nothing installed. I don't have email on it. I have none of that stuff going on it. But it's just as opposed to having another or getting rid of it, I just
Yeah.
stuck it there.
That's a
Uh,
good use of another device. That's
yeah.
smart.
Yeah. But if you are looking to have a device that lasts longer, obviously, if you are just upgrading an older device, well, we already talked, you can't upgrade the processor.
Mhm.
So there are still going to be some slowness. So think about that. And if you can get a new one, and if that's the route you're going, you're going to want to think about the balance of cost and lifespan for that as well.
Right.
Mhm.
Because even we talked about, don't do the minimum specs, but even the recommended specs, if you can afford to go above it and you want to keep it longer, we do that. I'm going to bring it back to gaming, even though we're trying to talk focus. But when I built out my gaming PC, I went a little bit higher than the specs for the main video game I wanted to play, because it's going to get updates, and you know, people will be like, in 3 years, you don't want to be like, oh, it can barely run the newest Witcher
Right.
or whatever. So like, what was once a really like amazing fast machine is like, oh man, I need even more RAM now, which is
Yeah.
again upgradable, but think about the longevity of
Mhm.
that stuff too.
Yeah. It's one of those things though. You gotta be very careful. It has a give a mouse a cookie aspect to it. Is once you start, next thing you know, it's a
Yeah.
$4,000 build. Speaking from
Oh,
experience,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's really easy
Definitely.
to get started. But anyway, you guys have anything else you want to add or throw into this? We can go on for hours here. I know
Yeah.
but this
No,
is
I think
an
Yeah.
interesting topic,
the
but
other thing to keep in mind for longevity is picking out a good warranty with it.
Oh,
yeah,
yes,
If
definitely. We
you're
talked about that a lot last week too.
Yeah, if you're getting a desktop, you can get away without really having a warranty, or at least for home use anyway, without having a really great warranty, because the parts themselves come with a basic
right.
warranty, and odds are you're not going to lose it, drop it, spill something on it. But if you have a laptop, I definitely recommend, at least for me, I know I like to have the full like accident protection, and the first time you drop it or spill something on it, it pays for itself, and
Yeah.
especially if it's for for kids or in a family or something like that. I mean, I get nervous if I see my laptop or a laptop on the same surface as a
Fluid.
beverage that isn't.
Yeah.
I always like to keep the laptop higher so it can't spill on it. But
Water
Right.
bottle.
having
Yeah.
that warranty and that protection on it is peace of mind for it. On the flip side,
Absolutely.
I do that for my phone too, and I've probably spent more money on my phone warranty than I'd ever use because I haven't lost or broken my phone. But
Mhm.
for those kinds of things, it's good to have, especially if you rely on it.
Exactly. Get a quick replacement, then overnight shipping, that sort of thing. It really
Yeah.
matters,
Yeah.
especially in this current kind of situation that we find ourselves.
Oh,
So, all right. Anything else, guys? Or I think we'll wrap it up.
yeah.
No, that pretty much is
I
it.
think we hit. I think we
I
hit,
mean,
hit a lot of stuff. Once again, if you have questions, please fire them over to us. We
Oh yeah,
love
we have a
answering.
form.
We have a
that
form,
you guys-
yes, exactly.
So
And
there's
I
a
think
form that you guys can fill out to ask us questions in advance. You don't have to be here live. If you guys keep seeing it later and going, "Oh man, I missed it."
I missed
No. Ask us questions in advance. You can go
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
the form.
exactly. And if something that we had done previously, you have a question, we'll work it into the kind of like Q&A at the end of the segment or something like that, just to make sure that we get everyone answered. So just once again, just put it all together. Just kind of put together what you're using it for. Think about it. Don't overkill it, but once again, balance it to your specs and costs.
Mhm.
And once again, if you have ever questions about these things, please shoot us an email or contact us on our site. Love to answer, even if it's about what kind of gaming PC to get. That's a very fraught topic.
Yeah.
Very dangerous. It's a very
Oh
opinion
yes,
driven.
yes.
I'm sure you've asked all the staff at Valiant what gaming rig. You get 30 different answers. So
Yep.
it's a very
On
personal
every
thing.
topic.
On
Yeah.
every time. Yeah, it means that kind of the old engineer
A
joke.
rabbit
But I'm
hole.
not. Yeah,
But that's for another time.
that's a whole other thing.
Uh,
Hurting cats.
But yeah, definitely. And if you think that this would be useful for someone, definitely share it with them. Share it
Yeah.
on your Facebook if you think you're not sure who it would be helpful for.
Exactly.
Check us out, and tune in on Wednesday. That one's going to be a fun one, especially
Oh, yeah.
near dear to George's heart, right?
Oh
Mhm.
yes, it is. It's we're going to talk about ISPs for home and office, different options and considerations, I should say, and connections, types, how they work, a little bit of deep dive into it, and then making some decisions because a bad internet connection you got the finest of PCs and a bad internet connection, and you're still not going to get those FPSs that you're looking for. So, or this is going to make your stream bad, your connectivity bad. So we want to give everyone some information on that. So
Yeah, I mean, how many people in your house right now are using the internet? Let's.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
or knowing that that's a whole other topic. But just
Oh yeah.
so much to talk about. Anyway,
Join us
please tune in
Wednesday.
on Wednesday and
Join us Wednesday.
and learn about ISPs. All right. Well,
And
thank
ask
you
us
guys.
questions if you want.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, thanks a lot, and thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And I'll see you guys on
Thanks,
Wednesday.
everybody.
All right. Bye
Bye.
now. Good night.
Bye.